how I got all this pretty.
Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the Q&A session, you may press star 1 on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question. Additionally, today's conference is being recorded. If you object to this, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn our meeting over to Ms. Irene Ahir. Ms. Ahir, you may begin.
Thank you for calling. May I have your passcode, please? Hello, this is a live operator. May I have your passcode?
Hello, and welcome to today's second webinar for FDA's webinar on UDI. I am Irene Ahir of CDRH's Office of Communication and Education. In a moment, we'll be hearing from Indira Kanduri, the CDRH Program Manager for the Global Unique Device Identification Database, also called the GUDID. Indira will present Getting Ready for GUDID, FDA's recommended best practices based on our experiences and on feedback from industry. After Indira's presentation, we will host a Q&A session, during which Indira will be joined by Loretta Chi, Regulatory Policy Analyst in the Office of Surveillance and Biometrics, and Anita Rayner, Associate Director for Policy and Communications, also with the CDRH Office of Surveillance and Biometrics. Our main goal today is to help labelers of Class 2 implantable, life-supporting, life-sustaining, and new Class 3 devices be better prepared to get a GUDID account and submit information to the database efficiently and correctly. Now, I give you Indira.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have all of you tuned in today to listen to the webinar. The topic of today's webinar is Getting Ready for GUDID. GUDID stands for the Global Unique Device Identification Database. As many of you probably are aware by now, the UDI final rule requires that device identification information be submitted to the GUDID by device labelers. So what I plan to do today is to provide you with a very brief introduction to the GUDID, and followed by a detailed recommended preparatory steps to get you ready to submit to the GUDID. So let's get started. And for those of you who listened to the UDI 101 webinar, which was just provided a few minutes ago, you have the basic information. For those of you who did not, we highly encourage you to take time to listen to the UDI 101 webinar. The recordings will be available next week on our website, and that will provide you a lot of information to get you going. So again, just to recap, for those of you who have listened before, UDI stands for Unique Device Identifier. This is composed of the device identifier portion and the production identifier component. The DI is basically the static portion of the device identifier, and it identifies the specific portion or a model of a device and the labeler for that device. The PI is the variable portion that changes, and as you can see, it can be the lot or the batch, serial, expiration date, manufacturing date, and for human tissue and cellular-based products, it is the distinct identification code. So these things change frequently, and therefore this is the dynamic component of the UDI. So together, the DI and the PI will basically make your UDI. So what is the Global Unique Device Identification Database? So the GUDID, as we lovingly call it, is a repository of key device identification information. Our goal is to have information available to the public once it's populated, and we're working to provide that. The GUDID contains only the static component of the UDI, just the device identifier component. The production identifiers are not submitted to or stored in the GUDID. So this means that we're not going to have every single device widget that's out there captured in the GUDID. All we will have is a record for a given version or a model of a device, which is identified by the device identifier. We will, however, capture information about which of the PI's attributes, meaning the lot or the batch, the serial, the expiration, manufacturing date, which is included in your UDI. That information we will have in GUDID, and I'll show you in just a couple minutes what I'm talking about. This slide is a fictitious medical device label, and the purpose here that I'm trying to convey is to tell you that a majority of the information in GUDID is directly found on the device label. So if you see here on the top, you see the CompView Hyperglobal Med, that would be the brand name. You see the GMDN description. GMDN stands for Global Medical Device Nomenclature, which is a way to categorize medical devices into broad categories. And right in the middle here, you see the UDI. It is composed of the DI and the PI components. The PI components I have identified for you as a production identifier, the expiration date, manufacturing date, lot, and the serial number as you move from left to the right. And in the bottom here, you see the labeler name and physical address. So this basically shows you that a lot of the information that is found captured in the GUDID come directly from the label of a medical device. We capture additional attributes, but a majority are directly found on the device label. So moving right along to the next slide. Here I'm just showing you screenshots from the GUDID, which shows you what we capture for device information. On the top, you see the primary DI number, which stands for Primary Device Identifier Number. And you see I am capturing brand name here, the version or the model number of the device, and device description, and the commercial distribution end date. If the product, for example, where you were to stop distributing the product, you would have to come back and update the GUDID with that information. On the left-hand side here in the bottom, you look at the DI record published date. Just make a note of that, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. On the next slide here, I'm showing this to you just to show you what I meant when I said production identifiers. We don't actually capture the lot or the batch number. What we are asking you to do, however, is to let us know which of these production identifiers are actually in as top part of your UDI. So if the lot or the batch is part of your UDI, your answer would be yes for this question. If it's serial number, then your answer would be yes, so on and so forth. So that's the information we capture about the PI, but really the main component we use is the device identifier. So moving on, the next slide is a sort of a pictorial overview of GUDID. The blue box shows you the submission options that are available, and the pink box on the right-hand side shows you the search and retrieval options. And we will go through this in detail one by one. As you can see, there are two submission options. There is a file submission option, and there is a web interface option. And for search and retrieval also, we have a web option, and we also have some web services and download capabilities. So let's take them one at a time, starting with the GUDID Web Interface. GUDID Web Interface is basically a secure web application. Folks wanting to submit information to GUDID, such as labelers, will need to get a GUDID account. We'll get into that a little bit more later also. And it's basically a manual data entry option. You will get a username and a password. Once you log in, you can put information in one record at a time. And this option is suitable for people who may not have a ton of DI records to submit to GUDID. The GUDID HL7 SPL submission option. To quickly go over some acronyms here, HL7 stands for Health Level 7, and Health Level 7 is a standards development organization, and what they do is develop messaging standards in the healthcare space, and they have put together a structured product labeling standard, which is the SPL standard, and we've taken the SPL standard, and what we've done is to constrain it to the GUDID space. And we have taken the SPL standard, and we're going to ask you to take your device identification information that you want to submit to GUDID. Instead of submitting it manually by typing it in, you take your information and you put it as an XML file. And once you have your file together, if you look on the right-hand side pictorial, there you have your green XML file. You then send it through the FDA Electronic Submissions Gateway. So what is the FDA ESG? The FDA Electronic Submissions Gateway is a way that the FDA receives all electronic regulatory submissions. The gateway basically makes sure that the submission is secure, and the gateway also authenticates who the sender is. So we know if labeler A is sending a file to the GUDID, we have a way to verify that it is in fact labeler A sending the submission. So once you send it through the FDA ESG, they route it to CDRH. Once it comes to our center, we will process it and load it to the Global Unique Device Identification Database. So in this case, since you are taking your information and you are putting it as an XML file, we want to make sure that the way you put your XML file together works, and we are able to take it and load it and process it. Therefore, we're going to ask you to do some testing. So there is testing required, and we have information on what testing and how much testing that you need to do on our website. So once you complete testing, then we will allow you to submit information to the production system. And testing helps you and it helps us because we all make sure that once you get to production, we have no issues. So the technical specs on how to do all this, how to format your file as an XML file is all available on our website. And again, this option is suitable for those of you who may have a large number of records to submit to GUDID. It's resource intensive, as you can see, the number of steps involved in getting your XML together and the testing required. But once you set it up, it should be fairly smooth sailing. So all the labelers come in and they put the data in GUDID, and what do we do with it if we don't release it to the public? And of course, we want to get it out to the public. So we are working with the National Library of Medicine as we speak to provide for GUDID public search and GUDID database download and web services. Initially, we will start out with the basic search and download capabilities, and then down the road, we plan to provide web services. And what type of information are we going to release? Not everything that you submit will be released. There are certain data elements which we consider to be confidential, such as the listing number will not be released. What we are releasing and not is on our website. I will point that out to you shortly. But if you remember the DI record published date that I asked you to keep in your mind, that's how you tell us when your record is ready to be released to the public. So you have the ability to indicate that this record is good to go. It can be released to the public. So once the record hits the DI record published date, then a published DI record is what we're going to make available for the public. And we're looking to have this capability available by spring 2015. So stay tuned for more information on that as we get closer to the date. A quick word about data quality. As if you listen to the UDI 101 webinar, you know that an important step in UDI implementation is adoption of UDI, and we are very actively working to get UDIs adopted in electronic health records and claims data and registries and so on. It's very important to us to make sure that the data you submit to GUDID is of top quality, and we are working actively with labelers. And the things that we are looking for and the things that we have learned so far is that it's very important for you to take the time to make sure your UDI is constructed as it should be according to the issuing agency standards. For example, if you are using the GS1 standard and you construct your device identifier number, which for you would be a G10, the G10 has a check digit number. The check digit has to validate. If not, the G10 is not constructed correctly. We are finding DIs submitted to GUDID that are not validating correctly against the check digit. So we ask, we're checking those sorts of things. That's number one. The other thing for you to keep in mind is devices come into CDRH, they get approved, and you provide us some information, and we approve the device based on the information provided. Then you come in and you register and list the device. You provide information there. And then you're going to come into GUDID and provide us the device identification information. So we're looking to see that there is consistency across all these different touch points. And if there are any discrepancies, we may contact you and try to understand, what the source of those discrepancies are. So the point here is, as you gather your data and as you get ready to work on GUDID, please keep in mind data quality. Make sure your source systems are accurate and correct, and there may be cleanup necessary. Basically, data quality has to be a main theme for you as you work on GUDID. All right. Moving on. So that's a introduction, a very brief introduction into GUDID. Now let's talk about how do you prepare to submit information to the Global Unique Device Identification Database. There are, based on our experience working with Class 3 labelers over the last year, we have these 9 recommended steps that we have that help you prepare and be more ready to submit GUDID and hopefully give you a smooth sailing, if you will. That's our hope for you and for us. So let's start right into it. So everybody likes to say everything is on everybody's website. You know, you want information, they say go to this website, go to that website, it's all on our website. So somebody told me, you know, it would be really helpful if you kind of give me a map. There is so much information on the website. And websites by nature kind of take you tangentially to different places. So here is a proposed map. You don't have to follow it, but this is a map that we think might be helpful. So start with the simple, beautiful URL, www.fda.gov/UDI. You come into this page. Then I recommend you go to the UDI Basics section. And what does this tell you? This will tell you what is a UDI, who is a labeler, and information such as this, if you're very new to it, doesn't hurt to repeat. The more you repeat, you know, the better it gels in. At least that's what helps me. Repetition. So there is what is a UDI and who is a labeler. The question of who is a labeler is something that we heard a lot come up in the UDI 101 webinar, and it can be confusing. So take your time and look here, gives you the basics. Then you may want to meander to the UDI Resources section. And here you have our famous final rule. It is pretty good reading, surprisingly. I'm not a reg person, but you should read it. And you may also want to consider looking at the Small Entity Compliance Guide. You see it on the slide here, right about the bottom there with the red circle. The Small Entity Compliance Guide was written to help smaller businesses understand the final rule. It may be a little more readable. And there are also frequently asked questions, which we have gathered over the last year. May already have the question, answer to the question that you have, and the training that we work to put together. So this is definitely worth pursuing, the UDI Resources section. Then you may want to come over to the GUDID section. The GUDID section on the left-hand side, really, as I was preparing for this, I realized the sequence of how you should pursue this website for the GUDID section is pretty well laid out. If you just follow it from top to bottom, you pretty much have it made. So let's look what's there. If you look at the top, the first thing is GUDID guidance. It's an absolute must-read if you are going to be submitting data to GUDID. It lays out all the details of the account, the device identifier record, and of course there is a life cycle for the device identifier record. It's absolute must-read. So read it in sections, reread it, dog-ear it. It will help you. Then you may want to go to preparing for GUDID, which is really what I'm doing now, is pretty much telling you what's in that website. And if you are listening to this webinar, that means you are a Class 2 labeler or you are a labeler for life-supporting, life-sustaining, and implant devices, and you should be doing this right now. So good job in listening to this. The information is really on there in the website too. Once you've done that, once you've gone and read the guidance and understood what's needed, then you go on and you're ready to request your GUDID account. And go to that website. It tells you what you need to do. Then you can go to the GUDID Web Interface. If you remember the 2 submission options, if you decide that you want to use the manual data entry, here you have a user manual. The user manual has screenshots, and it will tell you how to actually use the web interface. So that might be very helpful for you. We talked about the XML file submission option. The HL7SPL technical specification files are here. That gives you all the information you need to pursue that option. The GUDID system status, another important page, mainly because just like any other IT system, we do have to take the GUDID down, and this is where you'll find information on when the system is going to be down. and enhancements and fixes. If we make any changes to GUDID, we keep a running tab of what has been changed over here, which might be helpful for people to know. So really, if you go from top to bottom, I think that's a good map for you. That would be our recommendation. Last but not the least, the GUDID Resources section is very important. The GUDID Data Elements Reference Table, it's a mouthful, but what it basically does is it provides you a list of GUDID data elements. So all the things that we captured in GUDID, and if you look, it will give you a description and some of the data entry notes to keep in mind, whether it's a required attribute, what is the length, and whether it's numeric field, alphanumeric field. This will be very helpful for you as you gather your data to submit to GUDID. So definitely take a look at the GUDID Data Elements Reference Table. In fact, we just updated this this morning. So you have a brand new copy there with more clarity and information that was updated based on all the questions we have received over the last year. So you're good to go there. Moving along, so that's the website map for you. And let's say you went through all of that. Next thing to do is you need to select an issuing agency. And as you learned in the UDI 101, what is an issuing agency? An issuing agency is the organization that basically comes up with the way to create and assign UDIs. And they follow ISO standards, and we have accredited 3 of them, GS1, HIBIC, or ICBA, and you may choose any one for you that works for you. Once you choose the issuing agency, you will create the UDI based on their guidelines, and then you need to place it on the label of the device or on the device itself. It has to be in human-readable and machine-readable format. So you did all of that. Then what do you need to do? Then you need to determine which GUDID submission option you want to choose. Again, we have 2 of them, web interface or the SPL. The web interface is probably for, those of you with less records to submit. HL7 SPL is one for a lot of records, but it's completely up to you. We don't limit you to one or the other. You may want to do both. But the thing to keep in mind, though, is you must have good standard operating procedures for record keeping, mainly because it's very easy to send a file through SPL and then somebody in your organization can log into the web interface and make a change. So you need to make sure that you have good procedures and make sure your records are all in sync with what you send to us and what's in your own source system. You also have the option to outsource all of the GUDID work to somebody. We call them the third-party submitter. And if you want to do that, you're welcome to do so. Identify them, and there are steps that you need to follow to let us know who it is so we can actually allow them to submit on your behalf. And information on that is in the GUDID guidance document, so please take a look at that. So then you've done all of that, you may gather your device identification data. And if you remember the data elements reference table, that will be very helpful to do this. Don't forget data quality. There are some data elements that will take you some time to gather, and 2 to mention are the Global Medical Device Nomenclature preferred term. Again, as I mentioned earlier, GMDN basically allows you to categorize devices into broad device categories, and the GMDN agency is the one that manages GMDN preferred terms. You need to identify one for your device. If you don't have one, then you have to obtain one. So that might take time. So please take a look at that right away and work to identify a GMDN preferred term. FDA listing number, only the owner-operator within an organization usually has access to FDA listing number. So make sure you identify the correct listing number for your device. And think about data quality, as I mentioned earlier. So now you have the data, you've gone through all the material, you know what submission option you want, and you are ready to go. What do you do next? Well, we need you to get a GUDID account, mainly because we need to know who is putting information into our database, because data quality is so important. So GUDID account is needed regardless of which option you choose, whether web interface or the HL7 SPL. In order to do so, before you ask us, you need to understand the GUDID account structure. And I'm now showing you a very busy slide with a lot of, boxes and arrows going all over. And we won't get into the details of this. The details are in the GUDID guidance, except to note that there is a regulatory contact, and there is a GUDID coordinator user, and there is a GUDID labeler data entry user for each labeler organization. So it is important that you spend time to understand the GUDID account structure and the different user roles, identify who in your organization will take on these user roles, and make sure they understand the functionality and the responsibility that comes with each of those user roles. So that's very important to do. Once you do that, you also need to identify DUNS numbers. DUNS numbers, many of you may know, stands for Data Universal Numbering System. It's mostly used in the financial reporting arena, but it is taking a foothold in the regulatory space and in FDA particularly. And it's a 9-digit number that's assigned by Dun & Bradstreet. And what we are going to do in GUDID is to use the DUNS number to identify the labeler name and the labeler address. So at no point in all the submissions you'll be sending to GUDID will you be typing your company name. You will just provide us the DUNS number, and then we grab the name of your company and address directly from the DUNS database. And in GUDID, we have 3 types of uses for DUNS. We use it to identify the GUDID account for your organization, and we call that the organization DUNS. We also use it to identify the labeler DUNS, and what that is, we identify the name, your company name as shown on the medical device label. So if you remember the fictitious medical device label that I had up a while ago, I'm just now showing you the labeler name and address as we have on the label. So in GUDID, when you are ready to submit your GUDID account request, you need to provide us a DUNS number that gives us the labeler name as shown on this medical device label. And that's what we have as labeler DUNS. And then the third-party DUNS, this is optional. If you choose to use a third party to do your GUDID submissions for you, you need to let us know who the third party is. And it's important because we associate the third party to your organization. So when the submissions come, we verify and make sure that that person is authorized to submit on your behalf. So please take the moment, understand the GUDID structure, identify the DUNS numbers for these different types of users within GUDID, and let us know if you have any questions. So you have a GUDID account and you're all pretty much set. So for those of you who choose to do the web interface option, the manual data entry option, you basically request and obtain a GUDID account. You don't need to do any testing. Within the system, we have built-in capability for you to get familiar with the system by creating draft records. As the name implies, a draft record is just that. It's a draft, so it's only visible to whoever creates the records. You can create them, save them. The FDA does not get to see them. And then once you're ready, you may submit your records. Now, even when you submit your records, if you remember, you get to tell us when your record is ready for publishing. So you may put a future published date, and the record will remain in the unpublished state. It won't be available for public view. So when you're ready, you may submit and publish the DI record into GUDID. For HL7SPL submitters, a few more steps to go here. You would have to, in parallel, as you work on GUDID, we recommend you register with the FDA Electronic Submissions Gateway. They have testing that they require you to do. And if you already have a test account, and some of you do, if you are an adverse event reporter, you are familiar with EMDR, then you probably already have an FDA ESG account. You can reuse that. If you don't have one, then definitely get a brand new ESG account. And then you get a GUDID test account. So in your case, you need to start with a test account. And if you remember, you have a testing requirement. Then you complete HL7SPL testing. And please take the time to do thorough testing. The more testing you do, the more ready you are to go to production. We have provided a few test scenarios that must be passed before you get production account, but that's really the bare minimum. Our recommendation is to think through the DI record life cycle and make changes to the record and make sure they're all successful, and really test all your device lines, because there are multiple business rules associated with different data elements, and if you only test the limited ones, you may not run into issues that you may encounter in production. The goal really is to make sure by the time you go to production, you pretty much are issue-free. And once you're done with testing, you will request and get a GUDID account for production submissions, and then you may submit your records. The other thing to note is there is no draft DI capability in the HL7 SPL option, and that's the reason testing is very important. So if there are any third parties listening, and third parties are basically software vendors or companies that may want to put together a software solution to help labelers submit to GUDID, you're welcome to do so. You're welcome to test your submission or your solution independently of having any labeler clients. You can get a test GUDID account, and if you need any dummy data for required attributes, we can provide that for you for testing purposes only. So once you're done with that, we talked about earlier about the GUDID system status page. We have capability for you to subscribe to get GUDID email alerts. If we know that the system is going to be down this weekend or this Friday, we send an email to all the users who have subscribed to this email list and let you know that the system will be down. When the system is down, please do not send any submissions or try to send the submissions. It's better to wait during the downtime and then send submissions once the system is back up. Occasionally, we have unscheduled downtimes. If that happens, visit the website to see if we have any information. If we don't have it, then maybe you are the lucky user who found the issue. Please report it to us through the FDA UDI Help Desk. So what's the status? Well, as a reward for all of you for listening to the webinar today, you are one of the first ones to listen to the news. We presently are accepting submissions from Class 3 medical device labelers and labelers of devices licensed under the PHS Act. On Monday, January 26th, we will open for business for labelers of life-supporting, life-sustaining, and implant devices. So welcome aboard on Monday, January 26th. We look forward to working with all of you, and we have now provided you plenty of homework to do between now and then. So there is tons of things you can be doing to prepare. Hopefully you'll find this helpful, and we're happy to work with you starting the 26th. We also mentioned to you we're working to provide GUDID search and retrieval spring 2015. Stay tuned for that, and we'll have more information coming soon. So we provided all this information. How do you contact us? Before I get into the UDI bit, those of you wanting to do the FDA, HL7 SPL work, you need to get the FDA ESG account. For all ESG questions, please go directly to FDA ESG. I am sorry, but they have their own help desk. They support the entire agency, so we rather they answer questions about their program. So the email address is on there for you. But for all other inquiries regarding UDI and GUDID, whether it's regulatory or technical, you contact us via the famous FDA UDI Help Desk. And it has worked very beautifully for us, and I think over time you will come to appreciate it as well. So the FDA UDI Help Desk, you go to our website and you complete a very simple form. As you can see, it's just first name, last name, email, phone. Don't forget to give your email, because if you do not, and there are people who forget to fill in the email, you won't hear from us, because that's how we communicate with you. You put your question and then you hit the submit question button. And what happens is it becomes a case in our help desk tool. We're using Salesforce as our help desk tool. Once we get the case gets assigned to folks in our team. Regulatory stuff goes to regulatory people. Technical stuff gets routed to technical people. And we review your stuff, and you will hear from a help desk staff member. and we will respond to you via email. If you have follow-up questions, all you do is hit reply, and you respond to that same email, and it's important you do a direct reply because we need to append to the case, and the only way we can append it is if you hit direct reply. There are people who have had issues receiving it because it's gone to their spam folder, so please make sure you can receive emails from the help desk, unspam us if you will. And we are here to help. We are looking forward to working with all of you, and the last year has been phenomenal for us working with Class 3 labelers. We've learned a lot, and we have provided FAQs and training, and this webinar honestly is a direct response is a result of working with the labelers and realizing all the steps involved, and we hope that this will help you out. And whatever you do, whether you submit help desk questions, account requests, submit DI records, please take the time to provide us complete and correct information. Don't forget data quality. And there is a ton of information already there. You take the time to review it. If you send us a question on something that's already out there, we pretty much are going to give you the answer that's already there anyway. So instead of waiting on us, you might as well take the time to review what's out there. So look forward to working with all of you. Thank you for listening, and we're ready for questions.
Thank you. At this time, we will begin the question and answer session. To ask a question from the phone lines, please press *1. You will need to unmute your line and record your first and then last name clearly when prompted. If you choose to withdraw your question, please *2. Once again, if you would like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press *1. One moment for our first question, please. Our first question is coming from Patricia Rupchak. Ms. Rupchak, your question is up at this time.
Thank you. On slide number 27, it talks about the different DUNS numbers. From the previous webinar, I understand that if you're a manufacturer and you make a product that is then private labeled for another company, the other company is a labeler. That's correct, right? Hello?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was coming through or not. Okay. Can we, though, put into our own GUDID account their information, or do they have to have their own account to put that information in?
So if they are the labeler, they would be getting a GUDID account.
Okay, so they would have to actually do that. They could not request that we do that because we would not have their account then. Is that correct?
In that case, you might be the third party if you plan to submit information on behalf of the labeler.
Okay. And in both cases, in that case, either way, the organization DUNS and the labeler DUNS would be the other company's numbers.
Right, yes.
Okay. Okay, that helps. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our next question is going to come from Geoffrey Hermanto. Mr. Hermanto, your question is up at this time.
Oh, yeah, hi. Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative here. I have two short questions, if I may. The first question that I had a chance to download the GUDID tables, and I noticed some of the elements or the attributes listed there is marked as optionals. Does it mean, I'd just like to have confirmation here, we can skip that as blank when we submit the data?
So in the GUDID data elements reference table, we have, yes, you're right, there are optional elements, and then there are some that are called conditionally required. So if you have an option, completely optional element, yes, you may submit information without providing that. However, our recommendation is for you to provide complete information where possible. As you know, the end goal of this is to make sure complete information is available for consumers. But from a record acceptance perspective, yes, you will be able to submit it, and you do not need to provide the optional data attributes.
I see. Okay, thank you. My second question is related to one of the attributes. It's called the DI record publish date. When I look at the data entry notes, it says that the date, if I'm not interpret this thing wrong. I have to enter the date of publishing minus 7 calendar days. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what's the last part of your question? What calendar date?
Yeah. So on the DI record published date elements under the GUDID tables, it says that on the data entry notes that the date determined the grace period, the 7 days calendar start the days after the DI record published date. To my interpretation, the 7 days indicates that when we're going to submit the data, we have to identify the DI record published date minus 7 calendar days to the actual days where I would like to have that data is published. Is that correct?
So this, again, the presentation was very high overview. We did not talk about the DI record published date or the grace period. So your question pertains to the grace period, and you need to publish the DI record and make sure it is in a published state to fulfill the UDI final rule requirements. So that should definitely be a consideration when you determine when your published date should be. As far as the grace period and the 7 calendar days, that is talking about your ability to edit the DI record once it's submitted. And the purpose of the grace period is give you an opportunity to make any edits after the record is in a published state, noting that once a record is in a published state, it's available for public view, right? So our recommendation is by the time you publish the record, it should be locked, and ideally, you should not have to edit the record unless, for example, commercial distribution end date. You discontinue the product, and you have to come back in and update the record. So we would like to see the record as stable as it's possible to have it practically by the time it's published. So the grace period really is giving you an opportunity to edit the record once it's in a published state.
I see, yeah. Because the confusion I'm coming from, on the same note, it says that we recommend you set this date in the future, but 7 days prior to any compliance deadline. So,
right. The DI record published date can only be a record, it can be set to today or in the future. You can't have a DI record published date in the past. That is a system business rule, so that is correct.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I can set the date in the future, and 7 days prior to release, I have a grace period if I would like to do edit on that data before it goes public.
Right. The grace period is really your choice to, it's just providing you ability to edit a record once it's published. How you manage it, it's up to you.
But the published date is, which is the published date?
When
does it go public?
It goes published on the date that is put on the DI record published date. So if you set DI record published date to be today, the record will be in published date today. And if we had public search available today, the public would be able to access your record today.
I see.
I'm sorry, but if you have any, we would prefer that you not have to make any changes to it, but you have that grace period in which to make those changes, but the published date is still the date that it goes public, not when the grace period ends.
I see. Okay. So on the Class 2 medical device, the mandatory date to go live is September 24, 2016, correct?
Yes. For a Class 2 product, yes.
Correct. And that's going to be the published date.
That's the date. That is the last date in which you can be in compliance with the data submission requirements under the UDI rule.
I see. So
but we're not saying that we're not in any way saying please wait until September 24th, 2016. When we open the GUDID to Class 2 labelers, we will accept the records from that moment on.
I see. I think I get it. Okay. Thank you very much.
And may I also add something that if you are a Class 3 labeler and you have Class 2 products and you already have a GUDID account because you had Class 3 products and submitted DI records, you may submit your records for your Class 2 products. You do not have to wait.
I see. Got it. Thank you.
And same thing for, if you get a GUDID account now because you have a life-supporting, sustaining, and implant device with you, and once you get those device records in, you don't need to wait. You can continue submitting. So anybody who has an account and who have records to submit, you can set the DI record publish date to a future date, but you don't have to. So you have the capability to submit. This whole open for business and giving accounts only refers to getting the GUDID account. But as far as submitting DI records, once you have an account, you don't need to wait for those device class compliance date to hit. You may submit. The only reason we are opening accounts in batches, if you will, is to make sure that we have the capability to provide the support that you need in getting your account, making sure that we can turn those requests around quickly, and we are able to address all your questions. So once you know the system, go right ahead and keep submitting. You don't need to wait for anything.
I see. Your explanation triggered another question for me here. Let's say if the company where I work now also making a drug product, and we already have a GUDID account, right? So what you're saying, we can use the same GUDID account to load the medical device GUDID information. Is that correct?
Did you say a drug product?
Drug product, correct.
No, the GUDID is for medical devices only. It's not for drugs. So
okay.
If you have medical devices that are covered under the UDI final rule, once you have the GUDID account, yes, you may continue to submit.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Our next question comes from Catherine Williams. Ms. Williams, your question is up at this time.
Is currently pending. Are we able to apply for a GUDID account before we get our final approval, or do we have to wait for approval before we can apply for the account?
And we're sorry, Ms. Williams, your first part of your question cut off. Do you mind repeating the first half, please?
Sure, yeah. We are currently awaiting final approval of our PMA, and we wondered whether or not we can go ahead and apply for a GUDID account before our approval is made final, or if we have to wait for final PMA approval before we can actually go ahead and do that.
Do you have any approved products at the moment?
No, we are a single product company.
Yeah, no, unfortunately you have to wait till you get approval before you can apply for a GUDID account.
That's okay. At least we know what we have to do once we get to that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
But when you keep in mind though, although the regulations require, or the way the regulations are written, the minute you put your product in distribution, you're supposed to have your data submitted in GUDID. But in fact, we're actually giving you a 15-day interval of time because we know that it's impossible for you to do this simultaneously. So because you have to get a registration listing number and so forth. So there is a 15-day period from the day you put your product, first time you put your product in distribution, and then you're required to submit the data to GUDID.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
Our next question comes from Brian McBrien. Mr. McBrien, your question is up at this time.
Yes, I was wondering, is it required to use these third-party accredited issuers for UDIs?
Sorry, what was your question? Can you repeat?
Yes, is it required to use third-party accredited issuers for UDIs?
So,
such as GS1.
Oh, yes. So I think you're asking about issuing agency. So just to clarify, third party, the way we use that term in the GUDID and UDI world is third party is somebody you are using to submit information on your behalf.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just want
I guess I consider them as third parties, but I mean the accredited issuers such as GS1.
Right. So if your question is who should you use to create and assign your UDIs, then yes, you have to use one of the three accredited issuing agencies.
Okay.
GS1.
I guess my question is, from what I understand, is the accrediting issuers is a quite costly thing to take into consideration for small businesses. And I'm just wondering how that's going to adversely affect these businesses that are not aware of these costs.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Catherine Wong.
No, we're looking at each other.
My apologies.
We don't get into the fee structure that the issuing agencies charge. However, my understanding is they are volume-based. So
I'm just wondering if it was taken into consideration before your final guidance.
It was.
And why? I guess why isn't the FDA issuing DIs, and why are they looking towards these party solutions?
First of all, let me say that I don't have the regulations in front of me, but the regulations do provide that if for some reason the fee structures charged by the issuing agencies become so cost prohibitive that it adversely impacts the small businesses, at that point FDA may intervene and become an issuing agency, but we're not at that point yet. So, nor do we hope or expect to ever be at that point. But that provision was made in the final regulations.
And whose determination was that? Is that congressional, FDA? I'm just wondering, who decides and who I would write to.
Well, the UDI final rule was reviewed, by multiple entities before it was approved.
There was the economic analysis done by the Office of
it just seems like it's not covered in a lot of these things, and I think it was an overlooked subject. That's all. I mean, because there's already cost in just implementing it alone, and whether it's revalidating for direct marketing, or whatever it may be, I might have to submit another 510K for whatever reason, just because of the direct marketing alone. So I'm just wondering if anyone thought about the costs involved for small businesses.
All I can say is, well, first of all, the purpose of this webinar really is to talk about getting ready for GUDID. So,
yeah. Well, I guess I need to prepare myself financially, and other businesses do too. So, it would be kind of nice to get an understanding of the costs that are involved in just signing up. When, for instance, we're a Class 2 device, and I understand you're only working, trying to get these implantable Class 3 devices and the higher-end Class 2 devices in the works first, but companies like us need to, understand these costs 2 or 3 years ahead of time before, we're ready to go.
We wish we could help you, but all we can say is there was a commenting time when the proposed rule was out there before it became final. There were several opportunities provided for folks to comment on the rule and the requirements in it. So at this point, we're focusing on helping people getting ready to submit the GUDID.
Just one last quick question. How long after I submit, I understand after I get the initial DI from GS1, for instance, if I add an additional product, how long will that take to be reviewed and be okay to use?
Oh, you're asking about an approval for pre-market approval?
So that's
pre-market approval, you will have to ask the correct group about that.
We do not have...
No. I'm talking about, let's just say I have a new product. It's already readily available. I want to add it to the list. The good.
Once you have an approved product and you have a GUDID account, it takes no time. It takes the time that it takes you to enter the information or send the information.
So there's no one that has to review it, and then they'll send it back and they say, okay, you can use it. It's just
no. Once you if you do the SPL, once you do testing, you're good to go. They're not going to look at every DI record, and we don't need to approve every DI record.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Our next question comes from Catherine Wong. Ms. Wong, your question is up at this time.
Hello.
Hi there. Hello.
Catherine, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. My company makes a combination product. It is actually a biologic, a drug, but in the same kit, there's packaging for devices like transfer sets, syringes, some are pre-filled syringes. So who is the labeler? And these devices are not manufactured by my company. They are supplied all ready to go in its own individual sterile plastic plastic container. So who is the labeler, or who are the labelers? And is an UDI needed?
Okay, so when you have an instance of a combination product that is both a combination of a drug and a device, the question of who is, first of all, whether a UDI is required or whether an NDC is required is a determination that's made under the Office of the Combination Products. And then once that determination is made, then it either goes to CDER or it comes to us. So without knowing more, we can't really answer that question.
Well, I know for sure that it is an NDC because that's the main one, the biologic. And it's registered on the list, in the drug listing. But what about all the little packaging that goes with them, the device packaging? Do they need UDIs? Because right now it does say manufactured by the device manufacturer, not under my company's name for the individual rack units.
This is a little bit complicated, so it's hard to sort of answer this in this forum. So can you submit this to Help Desk and we can answer you more thoroughly?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
And I have another very small question probably down the road. Is this FDA UDI system universal? Is it also, can it be used for Canada, EU,
No, this UDI system is solely for the United States and solely for products that are in commercial distribution in the United States. Okay. Other countries there are other countries creating their own UDI systems, but this system that we're talking about is only for products that are in commercial distribution in the United States.
Can it be, you should ask that. Go ahead. Hang on. We have another question.
Sorry, I'm with Catherine Wong. But if the company in EU has their own identifier system, does that meet this UDI? Do we have to have this? Because it's imported into the U.S.
Well, now, as I understand it, the U.S. is the first country to have this UDI system. So whatever you have in the EU is first of all probably not official yet. And second of all, no, you have to be in compliance with the U.S. UDI requirements in order to commercially distribute the product in the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Paul Hazelwood. Mr. Hazelwood, your question is up at this time.
Thank you. With regard to Class 2 devices, when would we be able to apply for a GUDID account?
At the moment, as we mentioned, we are trying to do this in batches to make sure that, we are able to provide the assistance the group that is trying to meet the compliance deadline needs. So we will open up Class 2 accounts for ability for Class 2 labelers to get GUDID accounts sometime this year, and we'll keep you posted as we get closer to the date. At the moment, unfortunately, I don't have a date that I can share with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next and final question is going to be coming from Dylan Alou. Mr. Alou, your question is up at this time.
Okay, yes. Good afternoon and good presentation. Not to rehash what the former gentleman had already asked, but I have a little bit of confusion about the issuing agency. Basically, what is their primary role? What do they provide, and are they mandatory? In other words, we have to go through the issuing agency.
Yes, so the issuing agency, what they provide is they are basically accredited by us. They use the international ISO standard to establish a way to create, generate, and maintain the unique device identifiers. So we have accredited the 3 agencies that we have been talking about, GS1, HIBIC, and ICBA. And if you would basically choose one of them, and if you choose one of them, then you are in compliance with the UDI rule as long as you follow their system to uniquely generate and assign UDIs. So once you go with
physically generating them, or they're just guiding us on how to generate them?
Exactly. They have guidelines that you will follow once you decide which one you want to use, and you will follow their guidelines to generate the UDIs yourself. So you will be generating it. They'll just provide you the guidelines on how to do it.
Okay, so they're a middleman, basically, for the FDA.
Yes.
No, they're not a middleman for the FDA. What we need is to have a standardized UDI system.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say middleman, but I guess I understand now why the other gentleman was saying, well, why didn't you provide those guidelines?
Because,
well, these 3, systems have been operating in the marketplace already, and we did not want to introduce another entirely new UDI system that would probably be more burdensome to companies than going with what's already existing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome.
Thank you. This is Irene Iyer. We appreciate your participation and thoughtful questions. Recordings of today's UDI webinars, along with the slide presentations and transcripts, will be available at www.fda.gov/training/CDRH Learn by Friday, January 23rd, under the tab Unique Device Identification System. If you have additional questions about the UDI or the GUDID systems, please use the contact information provided at the end of the slide presentation. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Again, thank you for your participation, and this concludes today's webinar.
Thank you for joining today's conference. As Ms. Iyer has said, today's conference has ended. Please disconnect all audio lines at this time. Again, this does conclude today's conference. You may disconnect all audio lines at this time. Ms. Iyer, if you'd like to remain on the line, we will debrief in the post-conference. One moment, please.